This is StarCraft 2, which is a pretty legendary game. We're going to be diving in and talking about it because it's on Xbox Game Pass. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. We'll be diving into the story, the features, everything like that, played off of the RTX 4090 with the i9-13900K. And Kevin is here as our expert.
Hey.
Alright, let's dive in. Go over the story, talk about the narrative, the factions, well, basically, I guess the races is more correct, and just the story element of it.
The second game is a return to the Kafrulu sector. It is, I believe, 5 years after the events of Brood War, and Kerrigan has won. She's retreated back to Char, though. Nobody really knows why, and the Protoss are off doing their thing. But the story starts with Jim Raynor, a sad and depressed, lonely cowboy in his bar, trying to start a revolution. And as you're going on, he is greeted by his friend Tychus, who has a secret. He's in power armor and he's not allowed to leave. Nobody knows why, but they're going to go off and do rebel things. As you're going around, you do the storyline where you're trying to overthrow the evil Emperor Minsk, who has betrayed you and tricked you in the first game and now owns the Terran Dominion, this big, huge faction that you're trying to get rid of. You're also being paid by the Mobius faction to collect artifacts, and you're not really sure why. The story is very cool, though. It differs from the first game in that you can select different paths that you get to go. You get a selection of planets you can do. You can kind of go off and go down this line. My first playthrough, there was actually a little story that I didn't even finish and go through. So it's not super huge where the end game changes with what you choose to do, but you can have a different experience if you don't do it all, which you should do it all, basically. Don't rush through to the end plot. There's also a neat research thing, which is really cool. As you go through, you can collect Protoss and Zerg elements with it, and it gives you like a tree that you can go up with either research, where you have two options, each certain selection you get once you collect enough, and you can customize a little bit that way. And I've actually looked and saw people even discussing what's the best path to go down, which is really cool and unique for that. They give you, I think, one or two decisions. It doesn't really matter how much you make, but one of them's like whether you're going to be a jerk or not, so that's kind of fun. But the first campaign is really cool, and it's funny because I think it makes sense for what you're trying to do, because in the end, you end up finding a way that you could go and possibly fix the Zerg situation with Kerrigan, which leads to an all-out assault on Char, which is one of the coolest things I think they did in the game, because just the cinematics and everything, it really feels like a fight for humanity the whole point. And as you go through and try finish everything, you get a couple decisions to how you can finish the end game mission for the first part, but it leads to probably one of the greatest defense missions, I think, in gaming. It's so cool. It's just waves and waves, and everything you do sets up to how you can set up your human defense for it. But yeah, that first storyline is just spectacular, and it's really sweet. To talk about the second campaign, though, you kind of have to give the spoiler for it, because in the end, the artifacts allow you to end up, it saves Kerrigan. It turns her back into a human. And that's what ends up starting off the second campaign. Well, the second one kicks off with Kerrigan now actually rescued and de-Zergified, even though she has the hair and all that. And she's taken off to a facility where Emperor Minx's son, who has now recently betrayed him and is joining you to overthrow his father because he's a total jerk, is trying to save everything. Well, they end up getting attacked by the Dominion, and Sarah and Jim are ended up being separated, and it's presumed that Jim is possibly dead in the separation. Sarah, deciding that all of this absolutely sucks, even though she was turned into a human, goes out to learn if she can still control the Zerg. And it turns out she basically can. So it leads her on this huge finding path where Zeratul ends up talking to her again, and he's also talked to Jim, and it's this whole overarching story of it. But she goes to the planet where the Zerg started with all the primal Zerg, and there's a couple really neat fights and some deep lore storyline there. And she finds her way back to being the Queen of Blades, but now she's free of mine, and she's actually more human than anything. And what I think the first and the second storyline are really good for is it actually ties up the first game really well. There's a huge love arc between Sarah and Jim, which some people thought was cheesy because Jim takes a really I hate you stance in the first game towards the end of it, but I thought it was sweeter than anything. Probably the cutest storyline I've seen in a strategy game. I really liked it. But it basically her storyline wraps up with you going to get Octorus Minx, and it's a huge fight on the planet Core Hall, and it really cool for the feeling of just going through and destroying everything as the Queen of the Swarm, which ends up with the last part with the Protoss, Legacy of the Void. And it begins with Arcturus, I believe. No. Oh, man, I'm forgetting his name. Either way, the main Protoss going back to take Ire, and then something happens. The whole overarching story that's kind of fed into it is the Zelnaga, and it's basically this god being that, like, all these gods create universes. This one decides he's going to break the cycle and destroy all life, and that's a huge storyline, and it builds up through the game, but it is kind of out of nowhere. Like the last part of the story with the Protoss feels really different to the other, which is kind of interesting, but it's still cool. And each one has their own ability, like where you pick different trees for the Terran. You kind of do the same for Sarah's abilities, and you have the main ship for the Protoss, which is cool. That like you kind of pick which abilities out of things. Like there's one where you can bomb the whole area, another where you can spawn photons and instant spots. So they all have the really cool abilities that come with each campaign that obviously isn't in like the multiplayer or anything. But that story is its whole other thing where basically you go on to defeat a god and it unites everybody in the end.
Sounds like one crazy adventure going on there, and that's the campaign. So, expansions, and where is the best way to kind of start, or do you do it more as a linear style in StarCraft 2?
There's a couple things. Like there's the Nova missions that are added on, and it's just kind of extra. It's an extra little storyline with her. It's not too long. The expansions do lack from like in comparison to the first game. There is obviously like the little microtransactions you can do where you can buy like certain profile picks and all that, but and like what's it? You can buy like certain voiceovers for the game, so the units sound differently and stuff like that. But there's like co-op campaigns you can do after, but yeah, there's not a whole too lot for the expansions afterwards. What is funny is the way the story works, as I was explaining that, like the Terran campaign is a campaign in its own. It's actually really long. It's like 25 missions, and they released them separately. So you did the Wings of Liberty, and then Heart of the Storm came out, and that was something else you had to buy. That's also what's great with Game Pass is I assume this will all come out together for you guys, which is wonderful because they made StarCraft 2 free to play at one point, and that's when I went and checked it out. It was forever, but I could only do the Wings of Liberty campaign, and I had to buy the other campaigns as I went. So technically, the other two campaigns are basically expansions to the game, which I think is because without knowing, I assume you guys will get to play it all, which that's wonderful.
Yeah, the whole package and everything will be available together, which is great for people wanting to, I guess, play what they might have missed and also check it out perhaps for the first time, I suppose, which is great. There's also quite a lot more to StarCraft 2 compared to the first one. Let's talk a little bit about the cooperative element of it.
It's neat that once you're done that, you go into the multiplayer aspects, and the cooperative one is it's like little missions you can do along the way, and there's general like units you can pick that have their own like kind of special bonuses to it. Like you can pick Alexei Stukov from the first game, who's now an infected Terran. You can pick Matt Horner and Mira, or like basically her mercenary group, and they all have their different play styles. So you can kind of find one you like, and it adds to it a bit so that you and your buddy, once you finish everything single player, you can kind of go off and do all of that together without trying to do anything competitive.
Kind of a cool addition. Let's talk about the versus.
Versus for this game, it is, you can really see for the second game where they were making it super like streamlined for competition compared to like the first game, where you have to pick a specific section to create your own lobby and your own matchup. And what's really neat about that too is you can download maps that people have made, or like even that Blizzard has made, and some of them can be pretty neat where you can get kind of total custom matchups where the special units in the game will be usable. So that's really cool to go check out because you can get a lot of different stuff, but most of the multiplayer is based off your rank. There will be like the single player aspect to it where you go in and you do a couple matches, and it literally will give you 5 matches that you have to do, and then they'll give you your rank. And as you keep playing, it will up it. You'll start easy, medium, hard, harder, all that stuff, and it will kind of, it goes off of that, so it's really different. And then as you go into like the verses, like the maps are even different in itself. It's not as randomized as the first game. All the maps are really built that there's mineral deposits all around you. There's certain pathways you have to go. Like, it's completely made in mind for being competitive.
Well, that sounds expansive and covers the versus and also, I guess, the arcade to some degree as well, since that's a whole thing where you can get a lot more content. It looks like from just kind of scanning through the online little tease showcase of it. Let's talk a little bit about the strategies, the units, kind of how you play, and sort of the factions you like playing as.
For this game too, I think I do like the humans the most, the Terran. They're just really neat. But it's kind of, there are different play styles, and what I think would get a lot of flack is people saying exactly their play styles, because there are a lot of different ways to approach it. I never got as good in the multiplayer in this game as I'd say the first one, because people did ended up getting really, really good. My one issue with the second game, multiplayer wise, is a lot of the times I feel like it comes down to who has the biggest army. Like, in the end, you want to build the units you want with the certain combination you have to counter what you think your opponent's doing. But you want to build the biggest army. You can't just, oh, well, I have a really good plan. You know, they're going to fall into this trap and half my units will crush them. But like, as for strategies I like to do, like for the multiplayer, you can't do the siege tank marine strategy I usually do, because by the end game you will get absolutely decimated. You need to find the right combination of like Viking units for anti-air and your battle cruisers and all that. One of my favorite strategies, who I think is the best to play, is the Protoss. You can get the Void Rays, and they're just super powerful air units, and it's really hard to do. But if for whatever reason you're playing with a teammate and you can get to the point where you just end up building a max fleet of Void Rays, I think they're completely unstoppable. That's probably my favorite combination in that game for doing it.
All right, that covers at least a little bit of a know-how for this setup. So, from the perspective of someone coming in for the first time, what would be the best approach to kind of getting into the game?
For coming in on the first time, I would say the same thing as like the first game. I'd almost say that you should, because it's coming on Game Pass, you should try the first game first. But if you're just gonna jump into the second game because it's newer, whatever, then I would say probably start with the campaign at first. I don't necessarily think you even have to finish the story if you're not big on it, and you can kind of go through with the other ones and figure out the game. But yeah, I would just follow along with it, because the campaigns are really long and in depth. And StarCraft, to me, even though it has the huge competitive aspect to it, has always been the story of it. It's another great Blizzard masterwork story in my mind. But for the multiplayer in that, I would mess around quite a bit before you try get into the multiplayer, because if you, or at least competitive, because if you try jump into the competitive, one thing that I would be worried about for these games coming out is anyone who wants to try get into it, because you'll probably get dunked on by people who really know what they're doing for a bit. But it can be a very enjoyable game if you just mess around and learn what you like in the game, and then you can take it versus other people. But yeah, I would suggest to people, play around with the game versus the AI for a bit, in whatever way you want to do that.
Alright, let's dive into general thoughts that you have on StarCraft 2. I understand it is one of your favorites.
It's a really fun game. It did come out like a while ago too. Like, it's not a very new game, but what I liked with it was they did keep the atmosphere of it. That again, all the soldiers are criminals. Everybody's kind of rugged. They leaned into the cowboy thing quite a bit more for the humans, but it is really cool. Cheesy thing that I do like is, as you go into the main menu, it will have it will be randomized at first, but you'll have different like screens, almost like what screensavers or whatever, for when the game's on, and you can change that as you go around. And there's a lot of really cool ones that I enjoy to look at when I start up the game. There's as you boot up the game, there's the chat, like a global or general chat, whatever you want to call it, that you'll see people being colorful, typing to each other in, which is kind of funny for it. But the game is really, really cool overall.
There you go. I guess it was about time that we did a video talking about StarCraft 2. Yeah, I guess that's basically your ending thoughts, right? Unless there's anything else you want to add.
No, that's basically it. Try it. It's another classic. It's the sequel to the classic. A must play.
Alright, well, it was great to have you in. I'm assuming, I guess, one more little cute note, you're waiting for a third one?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I can't believe they haven't made a third one. Funny thing with that is the way they kind of wrapped up the story, which was kind of weird in my mind with it, but it didn't really leave for anything else, so I don't know how you would carry that on, or if you'd have to do something new. I don't know if you would even just make a third game for the competitive aspect only. That would be kind of sad, but I would still play it. But yeah, I really hope they make a third one. Like, and I think it would probably play really well. I'm very curious to see how this does on Game Pass. I hope a lot of people check it out, because it has been a while since it's been in the spotlight. But for those who have played it and remember it, I think everyone could agree that it is always in the hearts of the gamers who enjoyed it, you know. So hopefully it carries on. Keep it going.
Well, thanks for coming in and chatting about StarCraft 2. I thought the third one would be like a little fun chatter point for you to end it.
Yeah, do it, Blizzard. What are you doing? No, I'm joking.
Must be an emergency.